Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
We've talked about bad judges before, and I may have even spoken about this judge as well. I'm not 100% certain. I'll have to go back and dig through my 1,700 videos to see. But Bill sent me notes and Steve, check out the story about the judge out of Cleveland because this is now coming to a head. From news5cleveland.com, Cleveland judge accused of more than 100 counts of misconduct blames menopause and sleep apnea. Menopause and sleep apnea made her do it. Morgan Trow wrote the story. The Cleveland judge is accused of more than 100 serious incidents of misconduct, and her legal team went before the Ohio Supreme Court recently. Her defense is that menopause and sleep apnea caused a generalized anxiety disorder, and therefore she couldn't control her actions, therefore she shouldn't be held liable for what she did. Cleveland Municipal Judge Carr is accused of these incidents from the end of 2017 through 2020. Most notable among them was her issuing arrest warrants for defendants who didn't appear for court during the government-issued stay-at-home order during the pandemic. So the government said everyone stay at home. She'd come into court and go, "Where's everybody?" and start issuing arrest warrants. I mean, it wouldn't be funny if it happened to you, but it is bizarre. She also allegedly jailed defendants without suitable reason, according to a 58-page report filed with the Supreme Court of Ohio by the Board of Professional Conduct. I believe at one point she jailed somebody for rolling their eyes at her. There's no question that the conduct engaged in by the judge was egregious, and it lasted for a period of approximately 2 years, said Cleveland attorney Nicholas Froning. It may seem that Froning is arguing on behalf of the Office of Disciplinary Counsel in his case against Carr, but you'd be wrong. She has admitted to many of her wrongdoings, so the argument is no longer did she do it, but why did she do it? So the judge actually appears to be saying, yeah, I did those things. We're not even going to dispute that I did them. I had a good reason for it. So the court has established 3 different offices that oversee various aspects of the legal profession. Each of them has its own role under the disciplinary system of the Ohio Supreme Court. The disciplinary counsel investigates allegations and initiates complaints against judges concerning ethical misconduct and or mental illness of judges or attorneys. Carr is accused of dozens of instances of misconduct over those 2 years that fall into 5 broad categories. Issuing arrest warrants for the wrong reasons and making false statements. Ex-parte communication, that is where she talks to one side without the other side being there. Improper plea bargaining. Arbitrary dispositions, meaning she'd rule on cases and just, arbitrary. Improper use of arrest warrants and bond to compel payment of fines and court costs. So if she thought she needed to put some leverage on someone to make them pay the court costs, she'd leverage the bond. Public confidence, lack of decorum and dignity consistent with judicial office, and abuse of contempt power and failure to recuse. So there were cases in which she should have recused herself and she didn't. The main argument that Froning made was that the board didn't follow the law in the application of the contribution standard. The lawyer argued about the wording of the board's analysis, citing the board didn't apply the legal standard required in determining if the judge's disorders contributed to cause the misconduct. And he says that she has these disorders of menopause and sleep apnea, and that caused these problems. And they start getting into causation, and apparently they were going back and forth between the court and the attorney for the judge. And they're discussing about the determination and the disorders. And in its panel report, 58-page report, the panel discusses attribute, discusses a causal link, but does not utilize the word contribution in its analysis. And they started arguing back and forth about this because one of the court justices says, how did this contribution cause 5 people to spend 28 days in jail? And apparently that's one of the allegations, is that her improper use of her powers from the bench put 5 people in jail for 28 days that shouldn't have spent a single day in jail. And her attorney said, the issue here is that her treaters were essentially mistreating the conditions, causing there to be counteracting issues. So when it comes to sleep apnea, she is unable to get the necessary sleep. So when it comes to menopause, she was dealing with issues wherein she wasn't able to function at 100%. The judge says, how does sleep apnea or menopause contribute to lying? Her attorney says, well, it affects her mood. It affects her ability to think. Clearly, it affected numerous areas of her life. Everyone reacts differently. One of the arguments of the panel on the board is that thousands of lawyers have suffered from sleep apnea and or menopause and not engaged in misconduct. I would agree with that. The issue is that everyone reacts differently if we think about it. So they're arguing about this, whether or not that caused it or contributed to it or so on. And again, like I said, they don't think that the panel, the Supreme Court, was buying it. So they're talking about all the different things she said. So one of the cases they talk about here involves a defendant who went by the initials A.B. in court documents. She was held in contempt of court and thrown in jail for 15 days. Now, A.B. was arguably the most extreme example of misconduct and was referenced in the report. And there, she was in front of this judge on a first-degree misdemeanor charge. So she was accused of a crime. And so while she's in front of this judge, Carr admitted that she charged A.B. with a contempt citation for rolling her eyes and for comments she made while locked up. So she rolled her eyes in the courtroom. That's contempt. And then made statements while locked up. Not statements in the courtroom, but statements while she was locked up. And that was something that the judge admitted during her disciplinary hearing in 2021. The judge admitted to antagonizing A.B. from the bench, acting in a rude and discourteous manner, and instigating the incident that led to the second contempt citation. And it just went downhill from there. So the weird thing about this is that there's apparently a history of bad behavior on the part of this judge for a period of 2 years. People were complaining about it, filing complaints and grievances or whatever they do in Ohio with a judge. And so the people who look into that started looking into it, and they came up with dozens of instances of misconduct. And it says they fall into 5 broad categories. It's actually more than that, because they say she issued arrest warrants improperly for people who didn't show up in court, even though they weren't supposed to. That she had made false statements, which judges aren't allowed to do. That she engaged in ex-parte communications. She engaged in improper plea bargaining. She engaged in arbitrary dispositions, where she would make rulings that had nothing to do with the facts of the case. Improper use of arrest warrants. Improper use of bonds to compel payment of fines and costs. And then problems with public confidence, lack of decorum and dignity. And then abuse of the contempt power. And then failure to recuse herself. And so this is a serious group of allegations. And for them to say, oh, well, you know something, she did those things, but she is suffering from menopause and sleep apnea. And, if you're suffering from something over a 2-year period of time, you should seek help. And now it looks like her attorney is arguing and saying, well, she did seek help, but her doctors were letting her down, so this is the doctor's fault. And there comes a time when in your life, you do become responsible for your own actions. And when you're a little kid, you can sometimes get away with stuff. As you grow older, there are often occasions where you get away with something. You're like, wow, I got away with that, actually. Whew, that was a close one. But when you become a judge and you're sitting on the bench and you represent law and order in your jurisdiction, and this appears to be a fairly low-level court. It's a municipal court, so I'm suspecting it's a low-level court. And people come in there and they see a judge. Judge walks in wearing a robe. Bailiff, all rise. Everyone stands up when you walk in the room. You sit down, then they sit down. You start calling off names of cases. You have the power to throw people in jail or to let them go. That's a very serious position you're in there. And the idea that you were on the bench for 2 years with what you now say was an improperly treated medical condition causing you to do all these bad things, did it also cause you to not be able to see what you were doing? Like, did it cause amnesia? Like, do you really look back now and say, oh, I don't remember those 2 years? Like, at the end of the day, after you threw someone in jail for rolling their eyes at you, did you not really go home and go, yeah, I threw someone in jail for rolling their eyes at me? That didn't occur to you? You didn't know what you were doing? And I would argue if you were that out of touch, then you shouldn't be a judge at all anyway. Doesn't matter what's causing it. And so it's a bizarre case. But as of right now, the arguments have been made based on recommendations of panels to the Ohio Supreme Court. And the Ohio Supreme Court has the final say on this. And in most states, discipline of judges and attorneys ends up in front of the state Supreme Court. So we'll see what they say, but I don't think it's looking good. And, I got to give the attorney credit for making the arguments he's making, but it's a very, very difficult defense to make with a straight face and say, yeah, for 2 years engaged in 5 broad categories of abuse and misconduct. But we can blame it all on 2 medical conditions that were improperly diagnosed, and therefore it's a doctor's fault. I'm not sure who's going to buy that. But Bill, thanks for sending it. News5cleveland.com published the story, and Morgan Trow wrote it. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Don't allow anyone to decide which path you should choose to start your journey.